Next we have Emily May, and she is Executive Director of Hollaback. Over to Emily.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, thank you. So I'm here to talk about being human in the dark days of the internet. When Hollaback started, we too started getting harassed. That seems to be the thing. If you work to address harassment, you get more harassment. And back in 2005, if you wanted to harass somebody, you had to mostly send them an email. So we got a few, and they were pretty benign. One person called us carpet munchers. And another expressed surprise that the feminist movement had finally put somebody on TV that showered. Yes. 5 years later, comments pages look like a cesspool. We got a feature article in the New York Daily News that had a big photo of me slammed on top of it, and the top comment on the article was, "She is so ugly that you could tie a stake around her neck and put her in the middle of the living room floor, and not even the dog would play with her." I opened up Facebook one day shortly after that, and I see up top, quite simply, "I will rape you." Now look, I'm not a pansy, but imagine that nonsense in your face, in your inbox, all over your social media, almost daily for 12 years. And when it started, I laughed. I cracked jokes at their expense. I made fun of them. I corrected their spelling for them. I told myself and I told everybody around me that this didn't hurt because I'm tough. It hurt. So instead, I started to envision it as this metric of success, that the more impact that you make in the world, the more hate that you're going to get. And I told myself and I told everybody around me that this didn't hurt. I was just making an impact. But it hurt. And so I started to pay attention to that old adage, don't feed the trolls. I ignored them. And I told myself and I told everyone around me, it really, really hurt. It started to chip away at me. It made me think that maybe I shouldn't be doing this, that maybe I should have an easier job. Maybe I should do anything but address harassment, that I couldn't take it anymore. So I started to step back, and it was slow. There wasn't this moment where I was dramatically like, I'm going to leave the internet, everyone. First went Twitter. I didn't quit Twitter. I just stopped saying anything that mattered. Then went Facebook. I didn't leave. I just got quiet. And now when I go onto these platforms, or really any platform like it, I get this anxious, uneasy feeling. One that's a little hard to explain. One that feels a little, almost like, you know that feeling when you're in like a crowded room and everybody has somebody to talk to, but you're just kind of standing there hoping that either somebody will see you and recognize you or that you can just be invisible, full stop. It's kind of like that feeling. It's this feeling of these echoes of years of abuse online. It's a feeling of being alone, but the reality is I'm not actually alone here. 40% of internet users have experienced online harassment, according to a Pew study. So I'm curious here, has anybody here ever experienced anybody saying anything derogatory towards you, discriminatory towards you, stalking, doxing? Raise your hands. Yeah. There's a researcher, Danielle Citron, who wrote a really great book, and she notes that online harassment discourages women in particular from writing and earning a living online, and it brands them as incompetent workers and inferior sex objects. In my work, I see journalists, I see tech folks, I see social justice activists, you name it, stepping back, stopping to say those things that are so important online, giving up writing, or just giving up the internet full stop. And so I'm curious here in this room, has anybody here, as a result of harassment, ever thought to yourself, even for a moment, maybe I can't do this anymore, maybe I'm not in the right field, maybe I'm not cut out for this, maybe I shouldn't say that? Raise your hand. Yeah. And the impact of all of this trauma is real. In a national study in the US of middle and high school students, they found that 45% of LGBTQ youth who had experienced online harassment felt depressed, and that 25% of them wrestled with suicidal thoughts. So if this terrifies you and this pisses you off, raise your hand. Good. You're still human. We're living in the dark days of the internet. You remember back in 2008, 2007, we all thought the internet was going to save us. And now we're living in what's been termed the age of loneliness. We're more connected to each other than ever before, but we're more isolated. We have this wide but thin net protecting us. And few of us have a lot of people to really, really, really deeply lean on. In 1985, 1 in 10 Americans said they had no one intimate with whom to discuss important matters. In 2004, that number jumped to 1 in 4, and presumably it's just gotten worse. We're yearning for each other, we're seeking to take care of each other in more meaningful ways, and I wonder sometimes if we've just forgotten how. We're starving to be really fully, deeply seen and heard, not just in the memes that we present online, but in who we are in all of our complexity, but we're scared to talk to our neighbors. And we're really quick to blame who's at fault for these dark days of the internet, for all of this harassment that's happening, for all of it, right? It's this guy's fault, or it's that guy's fault. It's Facebook's fault, or it's Twitter's fault, or it's government's fault. And yes, it absolutely is. It is all those people's fault. All those things are true. But here's what's also true, that those institutions, those corporations, that guy, they've never really had our back. We survive, and I'm using survive very, very intentionally here. We survive because we have us, because we have each other's backs. How do I know? Because I've seen it all before. It's my grandma move. I've seen it all before. We internet nerds, we like to think that when it happens on the internet, it's a whole new phenomenon. It's shiny, and it's a new frontier, and it's never happened before at this scale. But I got news, people have been getting harassed for a long time, a real long time, at a tremendous scale. Before I worked on online harassment, I cut my teeth working on street harassment. I co-founded and I now run an organization called Hollaback, and we started way back in the day of 2005. We didn't even have a word for street harassment, we called it catcalling. And now, thanks in large part to the magic of the internet, thanks in large part to the 10,000 people who've come forward and shared their stories of harassment from all over the globe. We have people leading this movement in over 50 cities, in over 30 countries, in over 19 different languages, fighting street harassment, and over 100 different organizations and projects have blossomed internationally to advance this movement. In the 12 years since we started, the issue of street harassment has gone from one people that just assumed was the price you paid for being a woman or being gay or being a person of color or having a disability and daring to walk down the street, to something that is universally frowned upon. So I started to wonder, what can we learn from our work ending street harassment? Number one, don't let institutions off the hook. Apply pressure with every lever that you can find, but don't bank on them to save you. They're not built for that. Number two, we have to have each other's backs. The role that each of us has to play in overcoming harassment, will overcome trauma, reduce instances of harassment faster and more effectively than anything that Facebook or Twitter or the government can do for us. So we developed HeartMob with this in mind. HeartMob is a platform where individuals can safely report their experiences of online harassment, and volunteers can show up, vetted volunteers can show up and help them out. They can help them out by sending supportive messages, by screenshotting their harassment for them so they have it documented, by reporting it to the platform where it happened. We've had about 5,500 actions taken so far on the platform on behalf of 850 people who have so boldly come forward, shared their story, and raised their hand and said, I need help. And everyone here right now should absolutely pull out all their devices and go on to iHeartMob.org and sign up to help folks being harassed online or share your own story. Because there is actually hope in this approach. Maybe 40% of us have experienced online harassment, but 73% of us have seen it and likely had didn't have a clue what to do. And there's really real reasons for that, really valid reasons for that. Maybe you were scared that the harassment would turn on you. Maybe you were scared of doing the wrong thing. Maybe you were scared of making it worse. HeartMob solves a lot of these problems, or at least tries to solve some of them, by letting the person being harassed define exactly what kind of help they need, and by doing it on a closed, secure platform so that the person doing the harassing can never find you. You get to stay anonymous as a bystander. Heart Mom's awesome. I should know because me and my co-founders plopped it out of our hearts and into the universe. But with a problem as big as online harassment, you're gonna need a couple extra tricks up your sleeve. So I'm here to teach you some stuff. Take notes, take notes, take notes. All right, first things first. You gotta figure out why intervening in online harassment is really scary to you. There's no bonus points for being macho on that. In fact, I'm gonna take points off your paper if you're macho about it. It's not helpful. This stuff is scary. It's real. We gotta be real about the fact that it can be scary, and we gotta be real about what's scary about it for you. Now, as you listen to these 5 strategies, what we call the 5 Ds, they all start with D. You'll see them right here: distract, direct, delegate, delay, document. Keep your big scary thing or things in mind, because we're gonna be able to find some solutions that you're still gonna feel comfortable doing. All right, number 1, direct. Okay, so this is a comic that we created. Our amazing graphic design intern, Kendall Simpson, made it. Direct is hands down the scariest one. It's the scariest thing I have to offer to you. It's also the one that the social media companies love the most because it keeps you on their platform. And it's the one where you show up and you're like, hello, this is online harassment, and it's not okay. The fancy people in our field like to call this counter speech. You might have heard that term before. And here's some tricks, right? Number 1, stay calm. Ask questions like, why do you think that? Try humor. Part of what folks who do online harassment always think is that we just lack a sense of humor. So try it, right? Try humor. Send them gifts, right? Label the comment, not the person. So that thing you said is racist, not you are racist. That helps them stay focused on what they did instead of making assumptions about who they are. Don't make fun of them. It can be hard. Don't correct their spelling, like I did. If you are a person experiencing harassment, you can do whatever you want to do. As a bystander, we try and keep it a little buttoned up though. And also don't harass them. This is the most important one. You don't want to replicate the same behaviors that they are doing to somebody else on them, because that just perpetuates that cycle of violence and abuse. Number 2 is distract. So distract is it can be a lot of fun. Distract, could just be sending people a barrage of grandpa jokes or a barrage of kitten gifts, because it's really hard to be angry and rude and discriminatory when you're surrounded by kittens. It can also be this example, which I love. So there was about a year ago, some Nazis built a bot that puts parentheses around the names of people who they felt like their last names were somehow Jewish, okay? And it was designed to symbolize what they perceived as the echo chamber of the Jewish media. So here's an example where Fareem chimes in, putting parentheses around his own name, right, saying, oh man, I'm Muslim, this will confuse them. And tons of people did this all around the internet in solidarity with folks who were targeted for being Jewish. All right, number 3, delegate. This one's just about sending it to the platforms. Most platforms will allow you to report online harassment on behalf of somebody else. This is Twitter's report stream, and none of them will admit it. But there is evidence that we've seen that indicates that the more people have reported something as online harassment, the more likely they are to take it seriously, because you are customers and they don't want to lose you. Number 4, delay. So at its root, this one is just about checking in with that person and making sure that they're okay. It's something that, you can direct message them this, you can call them on the phone. It really depends on the extent to which you know them. When it comes to celebrities like Leslie Jones, who you may remember from Ghostbusters, she was amazing. When Leslie Jones started getting severely harassed for daring to be Black and a woman and in Hollywood, people didn't know her, but they started a hashtag called Love for Leslie Jones. Same thing happened with Linda Sarsour, who's one of the organizers of the Women's March in the US, hashtag I March with Linda. But there's other options that are available to you too, if you know them or if you feel like maybe they'll listen. So if you're able to direct message somebody, or if you're able to message them directly or text them or whatever, consider sending them safety resources. We have a safety guide on HeartMob that you can send them to help them sort of figure all this stuff out. Also, just consider emailing them and reminding them, hey, you don't deserve this. Offer to monitor their feeds for them so that they can go and take a walk. And if you know the person, roll in with chocolate or whatever the treat of your choice is, right? And sit with them, right? These safety guides and stuff, we try to make them as streamlined and trauma-informed as possible, but the reality is it's a lot of work to sit there and do all this stuff while you're actively being traumatized. So sit with them, go through that safety plan with them, change all their passwords with them, and let them know that you're there. You're there, you got them, right? They are not in this alone, literally. You are sitting next to them. Number 5, document. So broadly, it's a best practice when you're harassed to screenshot the harassment that you experience and save it. The reason here is that you don't know when it will escalate. You don't know if you're going to need it. A lot of the social media companies, when you report it, they'll take it down, which is a good thing because you don't want that stuff out there. But if it starts to get violent or you worry that it's getting violent, you might want some kind of a paper trail. The reality is a lot of people don't do this because it's like awful and it's work. And it actually creates more trauma to have to sit there, read through all the harassment, screenshot it, have that toxic nonsense sitting on your desktop, right? Than it would be just to get rid of it. You just kind of want it to go away. So offer to do it for somebody so that they can prioritize taking care of themselves. All right, 5 strategies. You've written them all down. You know what to do. So back when we all thought technology was going to save the day, we also had this idea that technology was something that you could build. It was something that you could code. I think we know now that's not true. I think we know now that that's actually quite retro. I think technology is about bringing people together, and I think it has always been about that thing. And we cannot, in these really dark days of the internet, lose sight of some of our most basic, some of our oldest, some of our most advanced technologies. The technologies of touch, like actually touching somebody. The technology of listening, like actually hearing somebody. The technology of caring, the technology of being human. And I think there's something that our world needs right now. I think in this moment of great division, of great divide, of deep fissure in our society, of an internet that is in its darkest days, I think that more than ever, we need each other. And we need to remember what that feels like in a really substantial and meaningful way. So I'm going to invite you all to do something. If you're able to, I'm going to invite you in a second to stand. If you're not, you can just raise your hand. I want to invite you to stand up, literally stand up, for the person next to you, if you care about them. You can stay seated if you don't. Come on, up. I want to invite you to stand up for me. Up. I need you to stand up for the next woman who dares to run for president or prime minister. Up. I need you to stand up for the next queer kid getting bashed online. I need you to stand up for the next Black person who has the audacity to believe that Black lives matter. I need you to stand up for an internet that can hold all of us in all of our complexity, in all of our disagreements. And when you go online, I want you to feel this. I want you to feel how it feels to stand in a room full of people who are standing up for you, a room full of people who are standing up for each other. There is no reason that the internet can't feel like this, that the internet can't feel like this moment, like a room full of people standing up for each other. I just gave you the tools how to do it. Now it's your job to make it so. Thank you. Do I win the first one to cry?
Any burning questions? Or are you all stunned to silence? I think you're stunned. Front row.
Hi. Well, firstly, thank you for such a genuine, powerful talk. My question is, a lot of these platforms where this harassment takes place, seems like every month they put out a press release saying, hey, we're working on it, we're releasing a new feature to deal with this.
Yeah.
Do you think that's genuine, or are those token gestures and you find that they don't really have much of an impact?
Yeah, I mean, so we're in conversation with a lot of those folks that are making the actual people implementing a lot of those changes. And my experience of those actual people is that they are coming from a really genuine place. But there is a corporate incentive to act otherwise, right? So, for example, on Twitter, Donald Trump has violated Twitter's terms of use and conditions of use many times over, right? And yet, they're not asking him to leave because he's a huge money driver for Twitter. Like, Twitter is on the news every single night, thanks to Donald Trump, right? And so I think there's like I think the best way to think about it is that they're doing about 5% of what they could do at this point. It's not that they're doing nothing, and it's not that what they're doing doesn't amount to anything. I think some of those things are really meaningful for people. It's just that their incentives aren't lined up with them actually doing what they could be doing. There's brilliant people in Silicon Valley and in all of these companies making these things happen. If they were to put focused energy on it, they could do some really powerful things.
That's great. Okay, we have one more question over here.
In many countries, hate crime is against the law, of course.
Yeah.
And but these big international companies almost seem above the law, say in the UK. How do you think that could be addressed better?
That's a really great question. And it's actually an interesting question because when you look at hate, a lot of hate is very contextual. So, I think about racism. Racism looks very different in the UK than it does in the US, and those are relatively similar cultural contexts, right? And so to be able to identify what racism is and whether or not a particular tweet or message is racist in those contexts requires a certain degree of cultural savvy that I think that the companies are really struggling with. I think that, what is it going to take to get all of these folks on board? I wish the UN was really effective because that might help. It's a really tricky question. I think that's where my sort of faith in governments starts to fall apart. I absolutely think we should hold their feet to the fire and get them to do everything that they possibly can. And I know that the EU has made a lot more substantive changes than most places around the world, but not enough, right? The US has done almost nothing. Not enough, right? And so, I think part of what I'm interested in is yes, government should do what it can do, but also what can we do? We who understand the context of racism, we who understand what homophobia looks like in our own communities.
Right, let's give Emily a round of applause.